All right, hello everyone. My name is John Coughlin. I'm on the community relations team at GitLab. Really excited to be part of this meetup today. I think it's an important topic for these times. And so thank you, Christina, for kind of offering to take this one on. In the chat, I just shared a link to our code of conduct. The code of conduct at GitLab is really important, and we make sure that we enforce it at all of our events. You know, the kind of gist of it is that we want to make sure that our community is inclusive and welcoming to everyone. And so if you have any concerns, there's information on that website on how to report a code of conduct violation. You can also send me a message in the Zoom chat or an email to evangelists@gitlab.com, and we can work to resolve it right away. The email address that I mentioned is also in the Zoom chat. So quick kind of show of hands in the chat. Who here has used GitLab before? And I guess specifically, have you used GitLab before, and have you used it for education before? All right, I'm not seeing any responses, so I'll just assume that most of the folks are new to GitLab. Just to give you a quick overview, GitLab's a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application. So there's one interface, one kind of threaded conversation, one permission model for all of your software development lifecycle. And for GitLab, we really run our whole company on GitLab. There's thousands of features we release every month on the 22nd. And I think if you take a look through, GitLab and kind of what we offer, you'd be pretty excited. And, we're an open core company, which means we do have a free open source version that's available. We also have different kind of enterprise tiers for, different team sizes. So no matter what kind of size your organization, there's, a tier of GitLab that's right for you. One of our kind of focuses is kind of promoting our mission, which is everyone can contribute. And so thank you for being here today. You're now officially part of the GitLab community, and we hope you stay involved and contribute in different ways, whether that's attending our meetups, maybe presenting at a future meetup, evangelizing GitLab at your university, writing blog posts. My team, the community relations team at GitLab, would be happy to kind of help you should you want to contribute back to GitLab. A couple other cool things about GitLab: we're the largest all-remote company in the world. And so that's kind of where we're coming at this topic from today, turning some of our experiences as a remote company and thinking about how they apply to the education space. And we're also a very transparent company. So we have a public handbook at about.gitlab.com/handbook, and it outlines how we run our business. We also have a remote guide that shares a lot of the things that we've learned running the largest all remote company in the world. And I'd encourage you to check out both the handbook and the remote guides if you're interested. For today's presentation, we have Christina Hupy, who's our Senior Education Program Manager at GitLab. She works with all of our partners, university partners and partners in academia on kind of how to leverage GitLab for teaching and research. And she's going to be presenting about going remote in education, which is, I think, a really timely topic, as many universities are adopting either online or hybrid learning models in the coming school year. So yeah, a couple other requests. I would ask that if you're open to it, turn your camera on, but if you don't want to be recorded, please don't. If you have questions, feel free to share them in the chat or turn your mic on and kind of verbalize them. And I'd love to just hear about where folks are from. So if you want to share where you're joining us from, you can add that in the Zoom chat by clicking on the little chat bubble at the bottom of the Zoom window. And then when the chat box pops up, just typing your location in there. Yeah, and lastly, just try to be present, be focused, close your Zoom, your Slack, close your other tabs, and just enjoy Christina's presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Christina to walk us through. Oh, wow, Italy, Egypt, awesome. Thanks for participating in the chat, folks. And Christina, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the great introduction, John. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's great to see people from all over the world interested in GitLab and going remote in education. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation here and share my screen. Oh, looks like I need to be enabled to share my screen, John. Let's try that again. Oh, there we go. How is that? Is everyone able to see that, or are you just seeing my outline right now? Is that good? There we go. Oh, John, you're muted.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining. Today we're going to be talking about going remote in education. And as John mentioned, we're one of the world's largest all remote companies, and we have a lot of resources available online. And I'm going to be talking today about how we can use some of those best practices and things that we've learned at our company and kind of adapt them to higher education. And you can visit allremote.info right there to learn a little bit more and find some tips and tricks. And I'm really happy to have you all here today. And I want to start off by just talking a little bit about my background. And the reason I want to do that is sometimes it's really easy to hear people in industry give advice to academics and have them say, well, you know, we have no idea what it's like to teach and interact with students and do what we do in the classroom. And so I just want to spend a little bit of time about my background so you know that I have been on the other side of the fence as well. So I was a professor for over a decade. I have a PhD in geography, and I taught at a couple different universities, but primarily at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire for 11 years and made it to associate professor. And then I started to get really interested in industry and made a transition. And while I was a professor, I did primarily teach in the classroom. I taught something called geospatial technology or geographic information systems. And so it was very, very technical. It involved software and data science and a lot of data management, and then also some coding. So we use mostly Python. And over that time, I did teach a couple of online classes and also did teach in hybrid environments. So I've taught a completely online class that was actually on Python. So I taught students how to code through an online environment. And then after teaching for 11 years, I decided to move over to industry. And when I moved over to industry, the first company I went to was a hybrid remote company. So we had a central office, but then we also had people distributed all over the world, and we were open source as well. And so we hired a lot of developers from different countries. And so I have the experience of working in a hybrid environment where there is that central office and then people scattered all over. And now that I moved over to GitLab, and I've been here since November, and GitLab is all remote. So we do not have a physical headquarters anywhere. We all either work from home or we work from a co-working space or a work share, or some people are literally actually really traveling the world while they're working. So that's really amazing. So at GitLab, you can kind of work from anywhere. So I give you that background just so that as I'm talking about tips and tricks today, if you're an educator, please know that I've lived in those shoes and I have that experience, and I know how very challenging it is. And with that said, before we dive into the specifics, I just want to make sure that everyone who's joining us today is aware of our education program. And at GitLab, our education program is really centered on the idea of evangelizing DevOps and Git, and obviously GitLab itself to the education community. We work mostly with higher education, but we do extend into K through 12 as well. We're really also very interested in evangelizing the benefits of this all remote operating model, not just for how it can help people who are trying to teach and learn remotely right now, but also all remote opens up a whole nother world of opportunities for people who are entering the workforce. Because right back in the day, it used to be where you had to move if you wanted a certain kind of job, or if you were in a smaller community, there might not have been opportunity for you to stay there. But all remote kind of opens a lot of doors and changes those paradigms. And so we also like to talk a little bit about that. But just a quick note about what we offer. We do offer free unlimited licenses of Ultimate or Gold, which is our top tier, either hosted or SaaS, to educate, self-hosted, sorry, or hosted by GitLab, which is our SaaS model, to educations, for education institutions for free if you're doing teaching, learning, or research. If it's IT professional use, so kind of running the university itself, that is a paid model. But if you're doing the learning side of the house or the research side of the house, that is included. And I've got some links there. I shared the presentation in the chat. So there's some requirements there, FAQs, and then our application forms. So we really encourage you to check that out. And if you're not already a program member, consider joining. We have over 800 institutions, and we've issued 1.62 million licenses and growing. And we're really excited to see that start increasing towards the 2 million mark. So keep an eye on that. Okay, so for our topic of the day, it's really remote and how that relates to education. And I think we've all been thrust into this situation with a worldwide pandemic, where we might not necessarily have designed our class or our lives or whatever it is that we're doing in the educational environment to be remote. And I think being forced into a foreign environment is a challenge for anyone. So I think it's really important to frame your upcoming semester with that mentality, right? You're being forced into a situation that is foreign, and you might not necessarily have set out to do it that way. But I think it's important to realize that it's not remote that's a challenge, right? We've found as a company that we can be highly successful, and people can have a very high quality of life. We have great communication. We develop great rapport among teams. We socialize. We work really well together. We're super efficient, and it's just really about changing the framework of how you work. So again, it's not necessarily remote. It's not the challenge. It's being forced into something. And so we hope that some of what we've learned that we're able to share with all of you today can help. So let's talk about some of the remote realities. So again, most of you who maybe because of universities closing or shifting to hybrid environments, this is really crisis-induced work from home. It's not, you didn't set up to work at an online university. And maybe you have, but for the majority that I'm talking about today, it's really the situation of being forced into that because of the situation that we're in. I also want to always frame that ambiguity is okay. We're all kind of figuring this out as we go, and it doesn't have to be perfect the first time around, and I think your students for the most part know that. And if you're straightforward from the beginning and everyone has that mentality, it makes things a little bit different. If everyone's working at home right now and spending a lot more time, it looks a lot different than your university office. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have pets, maybe you're doing home projects and your office is a mess, or there's other triggers. And so I think it's just important to be aware of that. And it's a transition period, right? And we hope that everyone thinks about this as a learning opportunity in a way that we can think about how to do remote better. And it's going to continue, and we're going to get better as universities figure this out in the fall. It's going to be an interesting time. So at GitLab, we think about these different foundations of working remotely, and there's kind of 3 here, and I have to give a shout out to Darren Murph, who I'm using some of his material here because he's our head of remote and gives a lot of public speaking on remote, and he's framed this in a way that we can think about the workspace, how we communicate, and then our mindset. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's really a journey of iteration. And these are kind of some of the 3 things that we've found really help companies and universities and individuals make the transition successfully. I'm not going to talk too much about workspace, but I encourage you to check out, we have a whole guide on how to set up your workstation effectively, and some tips and tricks like putting a sign on your door for your kids, or a lot of our team members use green screens, so they're blocking the back of their room out. There's just a whole bunch of things that you can do to make your workspace better. And then we also have some mindset tips that Darren covers in some of his presentations. And that's really about thinking about what your day looks like, you know, waking up and not coming right from the bed to the workstation, having that morning time so that you feel like you're actually coming into work, and then you can leave work at the end of the day. So we have a lot of other tips that I'm not going to focus on today. I'm going to focus more on education. And what I've done is I've taken kind of Darren's approach and then the education side, and I've come up with 5 different things that I think really help people in their journey in remote and education. And I've got a list here of the 5 things, and we're going to go into each of them separately. But the first one is adopt a single source of truth, leverage a transparent communication tool, establish a communication plan, think outside the typical classroom, and devote time to fostering relationships. And along the bottom here, we just released these this week. They are new to Nukis. So if you know anything about GitLab, our icon is our logo is the Tanuki, and we have a lot of fun making different versions of this for different geographic. We have one with bacon on it. We have one for all of the places we've had our big our contribute and commit events, and these are our values. So starting on the left, it's contribute, it is results, efficiency, diversity, inclusivity, and belonging, iteration, and then transparency. And I'm going to put each one of these value Tanukis kind of on our slides as we go through, just to kind of speak to how this approach really relates to our values. And I think it also really lends itself to the environments that create really productive places for people to be teaching and learning. So the first one is adopting a single source of truth. And this one I use the efficiency value Tanuki. And first of all, let's talk about a single source of truth. So a single source of truth is going to be the one location where your students can go and find the information that they need to be successful in class. And I think it's really important to remember that when a student is in your class, they can go to each other, they see you multiple times a week, they have the class discussion, they always feel like they're clued in. And when you move to an online environment, they need a single source of truth in order to build trust, build confidence, and be successful. They need to know where to go to find the information, right? And that's the idea of a single source of truth. And it should be one place, not multiple places. And I'll get into why in just a second. But really, it's the idea of minimizing confusion, and question and answer over logistics, right? The less time you have to spend on answering questions about where to turn things in and when is it due and how do I do that and what's the schedule, right? The less time you spend on that, the more time you're going to have to really dive into the topics that you want to, which is your content for the semester. So what we generally recommend is have some kind of a living record that's a syllabus, but think of it as almost like an operating model for your course. So at GitLab, John mentioned we use our GitLab handbook, and we actually store that handbook in GitLab itself, and we're editing it, probably thousands of times a day. And that is our single source of truth. We actually have our CEO is very invested in making sure that we all know if there's a policy change, if we're doing something differently, you look in the handbook to find it. With the same, you can adopt that same idea to a syllabus, right? So a syllabus is your operational model for the course, and make it a living record of how the course is doing. So document everything that needs to happen. And I put some hows down there. And one thing I want to point out is avoiding the temptation to list dates and policies in multiple places. I'll never forget when I was teaching, I would have my syllabus and had this beautiful schedule, and then I would take the schedule and I would go put it on the LMS, and then I would make drop boxes for all of my assignments and put the due date on the drop boxes, put the due date in the schedule, put the due date on the syllabus. So now there's 3 places at least where the due date is. And of course, especially if it's the first time you're teaching something, if a global pandemic breaks out, one time the US government shut down and my whole section of my class was based on downloading data from the federal government. I literally had 3 weeks scheduled to learn how to download all major federal data sets and work with it. And so I had to change my whole course. So there's all kinds of reasons why you might need to adjust. And if you have information in 10 places, you're going to have to go back and you're inevitably going to miss one. So the idea with the SSOT is to put it in one place, the students know how to get it, and then you only have to change it once if it needs to get changed. And that, again, builds that trusted confidence. The other idea is if students are messaging you, say they send you an email or they ask a question, instead of you retyping the answer every single time to 10 different students, you just always point them to a link. And that's what we do at GitLab. If someone asks me a question and the answer is in our handbook, we just take the handbook link and we post it to the person who asked the question. And at first, it takes a little bit of getting used to that straightforwardness, but you can do it in a very friendly way that says, hey, here's the answer, right? And if the full answer isn't there, instead of providing additional detail to the student, put it in the SSOT. And that way, you save yourself time down the road. So the next one is to leverage a transparent communication tool. And this is our transparency Tanuki, which I think it's brilliant. I absolutely love it. And the idea is to use a simple tool. And a lot of people think, oh, I have to have this complex thing. I have to use all the features in my LMS, or I have to create my own website, or I have to do all these different things. And actually, students love simplicity, right? Because they're there to learn. The more time they have to spend figuring something out, the less time they have to learn, right? And the more time you have to edit things or create that, the less time you're going to have with a student. So we really encourage you to think about using something simple. And I put a hint there not to use email. So one of the most refreshing things that's actually ever happened to me in my entire life is coming to GitLab and doing the onboarding and reading that we discourage the use of email at pretty much all costs. So we don't use email internally at all. And it is a massive time saver. It's revolutionary. Email happens in chains, it gets lost, there's no record of what's happening over time. And so we really encourage you to think outside of the traditional email box, especially when it comes to replying to students. Obviously, there's some personal things that may need to happen on one-on-one communication, but we really recommend using a cloud-based word processor. At GitLab, we use GitLab itself. And so if you're in the GitLab Education program, we have a ton of resources to help you figure out how to do that. But again, it doesn't have to be complex. And so the idea really is one live document for all logistical information and edit it as you go to keep along in the course. And the next one that I'm going to talk about is establishing a communication plan. And this is the results Tanuki and one of our other values. And what we're talking about here is something called asynchronous communication. So let's think about a semester where you're forced to go hybrid, or let's just say you're starting in person and then you're forced to go online if unfortunately there's changes in the situation locally. So the idea of asynchronous communication is that your students may be in maybe 5 different classes that are all online, and maybe they also are working, or maybe they're caring for someone, or maybe they're an athlete and they have other things going on, they're volunteering, they have an internship, and so they're not going to be in that more rigorous classroom schedule, right? So they're going to be finding these chunks of time to learn, and to get everyone together synchronously is going to be very different. So adopting an asynchronous model of communication, I think, can really help. And that's about a self-service mentality. So the idea is to strike a balance between providing key information in a self-service model, while at the same time still allowing people to connect and ask questions and interact with you. And we've really found a couple of things that work super well at GitLab. And one of them is, if we give a presentation to a team or an update, and we have a slide deck, we actually don't record the entire presentation, and we don't actually give the entire presentation. And that's going to really be challenging, I think, for a lot of academics to think about, because the lecture has been such a centerpiece of what academics do. But I encourage all of you to think outside the box here and not record your lectures. I've recorded lectures. I've spent more hours than I ever want to admit recording lectures, and it's just not. It's for the time it takes, it may not be worth it, right? It's very rare that students are going to sit there for 50 minutes and listen to a video of you. What we suggest and what we do at GitLab is instead we provide the slide decks ahead of time that are very full of links where students can learn and find the information they need at their own pace. And then we hold a meeting, or the actual, say, lecture would be a question session. So you post the lecture ahead of time, the slides, you post an agenda, and then students can ask questions. So here's a screenshot of an example. So we posted our slides ahead of time, and then people came in this document and asked questions. And then instead of 25 minutes of presenting, we just say, okay, what's the first question? And then we spend the live time together answering the questions. We always record it and post it to YouTube. This provides students who may be able to make it, to be able to interact with you, but if they can't, they can still post a question in the doc, and you'll answer their question, and it's recorded and they can access it. So it also, you know, allows people from diverse backgrounds who maybe are a little bit more introverted, or again, can't make it, ask questions and interact in a way without having to be present at that moment in time. And I love this screenshot. It's from the slide, it's from a different presentation, but I think it really summarizes what I think things can be like. And we're using Google Docs here as an example, but as a really simple example, but any kind of live editing, editable document is a good example. And again, we use GitLab itself to do this, or Git technology to do this. But the idea is that if you post a live document, people can interact with it, and there's no conflicts, and you can get real-time feedback, and people can be concurrently working. And that's how we run all of our meetings at GitLab, is through actually Google Docs, where we're talking in the document. So there's a living record at the time. I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions or thoughts from the group. If anyone wants to comment on some of these ideas that I'm challenging, such as recording not recording your lectures. Any thoughts or questions or comments? Okay, for now, we'll open it back up again. So if you think of any, we appreciate it. And thinking outside the traditional classroom also involves devoting time to fostering relationships. And this one, I use the diversity and inclusion and belonging Tanuki. And I think, students really value that time of getting to know each other. And so when you're in this digital asynchronous world, you do have to be more intentional about connecting with your classmates and your teammates. And at GitLab, we found a couple of fun things that we can do. So say, for example, we use Slack as our online chat tool, but if you don't have a chat tool, maybe you're using Microsoft Teams, or maybe you have a discussion forum. And so when you have those kind of tools, create spaces for people to talk about fun things. So at GitLab, I'm in the dogs channel, I'm in the gardening channel, I'm in the barbecue channel, the cooking channel, I'm in the parenthood channel. There's so many fun channels that I'm in, and I actually kind of set them aside for those lunch break times, the times that I just need to relax and connect with other people. And we share photos and videos and GIFs, and I love seeing everyone's dogs. So it's just really, really super fun. Sometimes we start our video conference a few minutes earlier so that we can do chit chat ahead of time. We also do what's called an AMA. so we have, with our CEO and all of our E-suite, we have AMAs, which is Ask Me Anything. And I've gone to quite a few of them with our CEO, Sid, and you can see him here in the picture. And it's just been really fun to get to know him as a person through the AMAs. So people have asked him, you know, what book is he reading and what's his favorite video game? And someone asked him, how does his hair look so good when we can't get haircuts? And he explained how that happens. And so it's just a really great way to connect. So, you know, after being a professor for over a decade, I know that the connections that students make with the instructors and their professors is a super valuable thing sometimes for the rest of their lives. And so we encourage you to think about how to do that in this digital remote world. And these are some things that have worked really well for us. So we do talent shows, we do coffee chats, show and tell. We have pizza parties, trivia, juice box chats for the kiddos, and some scavenger hunts. And I've done a couple of these, not all of them, but it's definitely something fun that helps people stay connected and build rapport together. So I'm just doing a time check here. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. I just wanted to share some resources with all of you as well. And we have a remote playbook that Darren and the remote team have put together, and it has all of our best practices and tips and tricks and tactics available on this beautiful PDF. And I encourage you to take a look and download it from our all remote page, because I think a lot of it really can apply to education and both in the classroom and running universities as well. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at that. We've also did a extensive survey on remote work, and we have a report that helps people kind of understand some of the trends of what the demographics are and what makes remote workers tick and what works really super well. So for example, we're hearing a lot of people say, well, there's Zoom fatigue. Well, our data show that at GitLab there really isn't Zoom fatigue, because we only have meetings under certain criteria where we absolutely need to have them. All of our work is done asynchronously in the platform and in documents and in Slack. So we don't have to talk over everything on Zoom. And so that's one of the things that that's really kind of fun to talk about. And you can find, again, more info at allremote.info. As John mentioned, our handbook is live. Everything is there. Please feel free to reach out to me. We've actually come and spoke at individual universities and associations as well with some of these tips and tricks. So we're happy to follow up with you individually and chat in detail. I also wanted to make sure that yes?
Just wanted to let you know, we do have a question in the chat.
Oh, great. I didn't see it. I'm not able to see it, so I'm happy to have a question.
Luca, do you want to verbalize the question? If not, I can read it out loud.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I was wondering, maybe without video recordings, since you do not have these kind of traditional lectures, some students might be left behind. What do you think about that? Do you think that might be the case?
Oh, because they're not able to watch a lecture?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, that's a great question. And I have gotten asked that question before. So what I recommend doing and what I've done before is provide the slide deck and make sure that it's full of whatever links that you have that are relevant. So if there's a PDF or a video that maybe exists somewhere, on YouTube or somewhere out on the web somewhere that would help explain it, then that way when the student's learning and they can dig in where they need to, where there's links, that's kind of the best case scenario. Then what I do is, where there's areas where I know they're gonna want additional explanation, I make a short video. So we're talking 2 to 5 minutes explaining a specific thing and maybe doing a demonstration of it. So there's a lot of research showing that a professor standing in front of a classroom for an hour lecturing through slides is no longer an effective way. It probably never was, of really teaching people. Most people like to learn in a hands-on environment where they're interacting with the content in some way, shape, or form. And let's just be honest, most people don't have that kind of attention span anymore. Fortunately or unfortunately, with social media and YouTube and all of these things, people are used to these shorter snippets of information. And so what we find works really well is recording anywhere between 2 to 7 minutes is kind of what the research shows is the very prime attention span for learning a topic. And so if that means that, maybe you have two or three of those embedded in your slide deck, I think that is a better a way to reach some of those students. I'd love to hear what you think about that, if you've tried that before. Oh, we can always revisit that as well too. So I'm going to go ahead and cover some of these additional resources and announcements. So if you are in the GitLab for Education program, we encourage you to visit our forum where you can ask questions about using GitLab and connect with experts in our community. We also just released an introduction category so that you can introduce yourself and meet other people who are part of our community. We have a whole bunch of different blog posts to learn a little bit more about the content today is in a more in-depth blog post for going remote in education. I also have a post on an overview of our program. We have a couple really cool case studies, University of Washington, European Space Agency, and the Center for European Nuclear Research. Research in nuclear energy. So there's an exciting case study there to read a little bit more. I'm actually working on a survey to learn more about what's needed in DevOps education, so stay tuned for that. And we just launched a student spotlight program where we're going to be interviewing students and the students can win swag, and we're going to be focusing, featuring that on our YouTube, our YouTube Unfiltered channel. So lots of exciting links in here, and I encourage you to check those out. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any other questions from the audience.
There is
Yes,
actually. Oh, go ahead,
Great.
MH.
yes, I want to ask if this way of remote teaching
Yes.
does work for elementary schools or kids in school. For
Does
example,
it work for kids in school? In K through 12, are you talking about, or what what you may think of as primary school?
yes, maybe primary school or maybe a little bit bigger. For example, if we send them slides, maybe they will not understand. They need a teacher beside them, or for example, interaction with the teacher so they can understand the lecture.
Sure. Yes, I absolutely agree with you on that. So I would recommend that if your audience is students who are not quite proficient at, say, navigating the internet independently, and I think at least in my experience, I have a middle schooler, so from my personal experience, it seems that middle school, so here in the United States, that would be, say, around 11 to 12 years old, is when they are decently proficient with understanding slides and links and kind of that self-driven exploratory learning. If it's before that, then it definitely is going to need to be more guided. But at the same time, I would encourage, I would really encourage the adoption of some of the same principles. So that idea of shorter content, 2 to 7 minutes, that are topic specific, is going to be, much better suited for children under the age of 10. They are not going to sit and listen to you, listen to a lecture for 50 minutes. There's definitely, no way they would hold that attention span for that length of time. And again, connecting with them, so letting them talk about their dogs or show and tell, those kind of things really helps them build those social connections that many of our students are really struggling with in the current situation. So yes, not everything applies kind of under the age of 10, but I think some of the principles can be adopted? Great question. Any other questions? Does anyone want to share some of the challenges that they've had on teaching and learning remotely in the last semester or two?
Yeah, actually, I do have another question.
Sure.
I guess, at least from my ends, I had working from home suddenly, all of a sudden. So I had kind of set up a home office, kind of. And I guess that for students, it's a similar issue. So they need a good workstation, let's call it that way, for being effective students while at home. But the problem we have here in Italy, one of the problems, is that actually many students had to work from their smartphones because they did not have any kind of or PCs at home. Do you think that in that case as well, they could still learn effectively, or we should try to do something else? Because these techniques maybe are very effective on laptops, but without a laptop, they are much more troublesome, let's say.
Yes, I would absolutely agree that it's definitely not optimal to only have a mobile device. I will say that if you can use as your your main platform something that's mobile friendly, that makes a huge difference. So at GitLab, we use Slack a lot, and Slack works really well in a mobile environment, and the idea of asynchronous communication can be adapted to Slack as well. Writing in Google Docs is a little bit different, can be a little bit challenging. So if you have, say, for example, a discussion forum in your learning management system that's mobile ready, a lot of learning management systems are mobile ready, have mobile apps, then you can kind of change it to use whatever your tool is. I would make sure that SSOT and that main part of how you're communicating is mobile friendly if you do have a lot of students who are forced to use mobile only. I will say that if your lectures are set up well and you're reading a PDF, it's actually pretty easy to click on a link in a slide in a PDF on your phone and then take you to another, say something like a wiki page or a news article, or a sample code, or say a figure, for example. It is fairly easy to do that. And then also videos are fairly easy to watch. So maybe it's just that you're breaking things up into much smaller chunks rather than trying to take the traditional classroom experience and just fit it into a mobile mode. And I think, I'm sorry, a remote mode. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, is professors just basically try to say, this is what I've been doing, I'm going to try to just stick it into remote. And that's when things kind of fall apart. And so, taking these principles and adapting them a little bit to your particular situation, I think just requires a little bit of thinking outside the box. Hopefully that helps. That's always a challenging situation to only use mobile. Any other questions?
All right, well, thank you, Christina. That was a really interesting session, and thank you everyone who was asking questions, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm going to end the recording now, unless there's anything else you want to add, Christina?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for joining, and feel free to connect with me on Twitter, sign up for the program, and join our forum if you'd like to continue the discussion.
Great.